Welcome to the May 12th school board meeting. I'm going to call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda is I'm going to start with a roll call of board members. Vice President Cassiopo.
Here.
Clerk Varner.
Here.
Trustee Carini.
Here.
Trustee Crossman.
Here.
Trustee Wilkie.
Here.
And Trustee Ramirez.
Here.
Good evening, everyone. First item on the agenda will be the adoption of the agenda.
So moved. Second by Joe.
So was that Donald?
That was, yes.
Okay, so we have a motion by Donald and a second by Joe. Any discussion by the trustees? Hearing none. Public comment? Seeing none. I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the flag salute with Trustee Carini.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Trustee Carini, and I will just warn you, if you ever do that fast in my school, you will have a bunch of kids yelling at you for doing that too fast. Next item on the agenda is Superintendent's Report. Mr. Stokes.
Thank you, President Walker, members of the board, and staff, guests. It's a privilege to spend a little time with you this evening. As you know, we are experiencing an extremely unusual school year, and as such, many of our activities and events have been changed or canceled, modified in some ways. I wanted to let the trustees know that some of the events that we typically would have scheduled in May have been canceled, one being the Distinguished Student Award. Perfect Attendance Award has also been done away with this year. And most of the elementary promotions, for example, fifth grade promotions and pre-K and kindergarten promotions have all been canceled for the year. I do have one exception at Mark Twain Elementary School. Mrs. Calario has elected to hold an event in August, just before the students go back for her fifth grade. She hopes to have a little barbecue to send them on their way. With regard to our secondary schools, Carson Middle School will conduct a virtual promotion ceremony, and so they're working on the details for that. Eagle Valley Middle School will hold a promotion parade where staff members will be positioned in the correct social distance along the U drive into the school. Students and their families will drive into the school grounds, be able to be greeted and waved to by their teachers. And then at the end of that parade will be a place where Mr. Conley, staff will hand a promotion certificate to the students who stay in their automobile, and then that will be the extent of that ceremony. I do want to let you know that Pioneer High School has also elected to do a virtual graduation ceremony, and Mr. Zona has been working on that with staff members, and will provide that information to his students via the internet. Carson High School will also put together a virtual graduation ceremony. However, in addition, Mr. Ward and his staff have put together a graduation celebration parade, where, similar to what's been described at Eagle Valley Middle School, will happen for the seniors at Carson High School. The students and their families in their individual automobiles will be able to drive into the high school property. At the end of their drive, there will be a stage where the graduating senior can get out, have their name read, and that student will then walk across the graduation stage, receive their diploma cover, and then return to their vehicle. Oh, at the graduation stage, there will also be a photographer where an official photograph can be taken of the graduating senior. We've had some good response from this particular plan, and I'd like to really thank the parent groups who have worked with us and given their ideas, and also the students. We realize that this is not a typical way to celebrate graduation, but under the conditions of social distancing and other parameters, we feel like it's a solution, albeit different from what they're used to and have experienced in the past. I also wanted to provide some information regarding the fiscal condition of the state of Nevada and how it's impacting the school district. As most of you have read or seen on the news, the governor has declared a state of fiscal emergency for the state of Nevada. This means that the next step, the interim finance committee will need to determine whether or not the dollars that exist in the rainy day fund can actually be used to help keep state agencies operational. And even if that is determined, that amount really only covers the state's bills for about a month. So it's really not in a place where there's enough money to go around for all of the situations and conditions. As you know, we have been asked, not only as our own school district, but the school districts around the state and other state agencies were asked by the governor to come up with a dollar amount representing at least 4% of our state funds, which represent our per pupil amount, and also the state grant funds, 4%. And so that information has been submitted. The governor has also asked us to consider what we may be needing to operate on if we were to take a 6% or a 10% or a 14% cut for fiscal year 2021. This is not an easy task, and to reduce any general fund budget by 14%, I think you can all imagine that we'd be looking at a system that is pretty much unrecognizable going into the future. So we're very anxious to receive additional information, guidance as it were, from our state leaders, and ask that especially our staff be patient as we try to wait for this guidance and try to figure out what our next steps are going to be. I think it's safe to say that as we get ready and recognize that our next school board meeting will actually be when we will be finalizing our budget to the best we can, it's very likely that we'll be addressing our budget again once we have more information from our state leaders. I'd like to report also in connection with the state fiscal update here that it's not out of the question that the legislature be called back for a special session. And of course, we'll be responding accordingly as those things happen. We also have received just today application for the CARES Act. As you recall, this is a federal program that is aimed at helping small businesses, individuals, and public agencies like states to receive additional funding from the federal government. And our amount for that is just a little bit over $1 million, and it will likely be used to help augment any staffing shortfalls that we might have. I'd like to report that our schools are continuing to engage students remotely. Lunches are still being assembled and delivered. At the end of last week, we had an average of about 600 lunches per day and about 600 breakfasts per day. And so I'd like to give a shout out to our staff who have been working to provide the work effort necessary to produce this food for our needy students and families. And last week was Teacher Appreciation Week, and I got a lot of really nice comments from teachers who appreciated the work that had been shown to them and the appreciation that had been shown by their principals. And it was really a fun week, and I was grateful for our staff being able to be recognized in the work done by our principals. Lastly, as we're getting ready to look into summer planning and work for next school year, we have put together a recovery committee to consider a variety of different scenarios that might be presented to us as we get ready to start school. I was mentioning that earlier tonight I had a chance to look at the national news, and the UC system, university system in California has announced already that their schools will open next fall only to online courses. And so that could be a signal for what we may expect or be ready to expect. And it will be very helpful to have a group of individual staff members as part of our recovery committee that will help us to provide information and details around a variety of different situations. So with that, President Walker, that would be the end of my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that our trustees might have.
Thank you. Trustees, do you have any questions for Mr. Stokes? I'll just go down and do a roll call. Joe?
Sorry, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. I lost my mute button. No, I guess no questions for Mr. Stokes. I would like to thank Mr. Stokes for keeping us informed. And you know, it's an interesting time going forward. So any information he receives, I do appreciate getting updates from him. It's helpful, as all of you know. We get a lot of emails from community members wondering what's going on, and you know, we want to be able to give them accurate information as best we know. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Richard?
Yes, I was just wondering, is the $1 million from the CARES Act, is that a guaranteed amount that we're going to get, or is that just a grant application and we have to wait to see if we get awarded it?
Thank you, Mr. Varner, for the question. That is the amount that has been earmarked for Carson City School District. The number was actually a little higher than that, but we also have obligations to provide a portion of that funding to Carson Montessori, also to St. Teresa's and Bethlehem Lutheran. So there's a small portion of that dollar amount that will go to those schools.
Thank you.
Don, do you have any questions for Mr. Stokes?
No questions. Just thank you, Mr. Stokes, and all your staff for all the hard work.
Thank you, Mr. Creaney.
Laurel, did you have any questions?
None at this time. Just a thank you for everything. It's tough.
Thanks, Laurel. Stacy, do you have any questions?
No, ditto what everybody else has said. We appreciate everything everybody's doing.
Thank you. Lupe?
No questions. I just want to make a comment and thank Mr. Stokes for the initiative of getting started with the recovery committee. I think this is going to be very important as we move forward because we really don't know what to expect. So thank you, Mr. Stokes.
Thank you, everyone. And I know it's been a while since we've had a meeting, and please know that if you have a question, I'm always available by email or phone. Please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes. Next item on the agenda is board reports, and we'll start with Lupe, since you have yourself unmuted, I hope. We'll start with you.
You bet. For Mark Twain, on April 16, I had the pleasure to go and speak to speak with the parents via Zoom. Victor Garcia, the ESL paraprofessional, coordinated this Zoom meeting, and he invited me to speak to the parents about my involvement with the school board, and I pretty much gave them the presentation that we did back in November to inform the Spanish-speaking parents about our role and our responsibilities. And so they were very appreciative, and they found the information very educational. Also, Mrs. Erin Bean from Carson High School invited me to do a presentation on May 18th at 6 p.m. And it will be for her Family Engagement Series 2020. The title is going to be Empowering Families While Practicing Social Distancing. I will be talking to them about the importance of following the guidelines of maintaining social distance, and also will be encouraging them to use this free time to learn more about the education system, including the presentation that we did for the Spanish-speaking families in November. Again, we want to definitely engage them in this conversation. And Trustee Stacy Wilkie, your vision carries on. We are definitely engaging the families in these important topics. So thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Lupe. Stacy, board report?
No, thank you for keeping us in the loop, Lupe, and keeping our vision going. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Laurel, do you have a board report?
I do. For First Elementary School, Principal Brown would like to wish all the families well and let them know that they miss them very much. For Fremont Elementary School, Principal Ward wanted to let the students and families know that they do have plans for students to retrieve their items left at school, and information for how to do that will be going out the end of this week. And also, they will not be having any promotion celebrations for kinder or fifth grade. And then just me personally as my board report, I'd like to thank Mr. Ward at Carson High School for all of the effort that he's put into for the high school graduation plans. I know that there's some parents that are disappointed, and I think, everybody wishes that we could do the traditional graduations that we've done. But I think given the parameters that we have to work underneath at this time, that they've come up with a really good solution that will give parents and families an opportunity to participate and kids to still have a graduation experience. So I just would like to thank him and all the staff at Carson High for planning that. And then I just wanted to give an update because I am a parent of 5 students who are engaged in distance learning right now. And I think as we look and Mr. Stokes works with the recovery committee on what we're doing, because I'm just imagining that distance learning may be something that we have to use more frequently than we ever have before. So some of the kids thrive. I have 3 high schoolers and 2 elementary students. Some of them are doing okay. Some of them are drowning. Some of them can't keep track of where everything is. And me as a parent, I'm having a hard time keeping track of where everything is. They've got Zoom meetings. We've got tests on Mastery Connect. They have Google Classroom. There's Infinite Campus that I'm familiar with as a parent for accessing, but now I have to look in all the other areas as well. There's also Dojo and email. So just keeping track of all of that, it's a lot for the kids to do. They take a test on Mastery Connect, and then they have to go back to Google Classroom and mark it as done. And so hopefully there's some ways that we can streamline some of this. I think our district is really fortunate that we already had the one-to-one set up, and I know our teachers have done an amazing job getting this going, because it was literally building the airplane while you're flying it off a cliff in the Himalayas and the plane's on fire. So I know that they have done a really good job, but I just want everyone to know too, it's not, the kids, some of them are having a hard time. Some of the little guys, have different days, different emotions, and they don't know how to deal with not seeing their friends, not having their normal routine. And these are, and I'm just speaking for my kids and my family, that we're supported. We're fairly stable. We don't have some of the other upheavals that a lot of families are going through. And so, I just want to make sure that that's something that we're aware of. And just with the packet, the advice I've told other parents is to just, for elementary kids, it's hard. I think they struggle more probably than my high schoolers do with it. But everyone has issues at times with it. But I've been telling people just to do the best they can, to keep it up, and just to read to their kids, and keep do what you can. And you know, I think we need to remember, like, even the kids feel the crisis mode that people are in. So I just wanted to give that update to let staff know that as we go forward, there are areas that we can work on if we need to continue distance learning in the fall, or if it's something where we're on in classrooms for part of the time, but maybe we have to close classrooms for hotspots or whatever. There's a lot of really good things that happen, but there's still some work that could be done. So that concludes my report.
Laurel, I know Mr. Stokes wants to respond to your comments. So Mr. Stokes, go ahead.
Okay.
Trustee Crossman, thank you for raising those concerns. My peers and I had a Zoom meeting a week ago, and joining us was the State Superintendent, Joan Ebert, and she indicated that the Department of Education was working on a plan to provide for all of the districts in Nevada a learning management system, which is exactly what you described. It's a way to try to organize and manage the different concepts and considerations associated with distance learning. The initial presentation mentioned that the department would actually purchase approximately 18 months of that program, after which the cost would then trickle down, as you would expect, to the districts. And so we hope to be able to be in on some of that decision-making, and hopefully some of those processes will actually help improve what some of our families are experiencing. And you did a nice job of talking about some of the challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurel. Dawn?
Thank you.
Dr. Conley, principal at Eagle Valley Middle School, he had given me some notes to talk about their promotion drive-through recognition event. But Mr. Stokes, you talked about it a little bit. A couple more details. The actual promotion certificates in Mr. Conley or Dr. Conley's notes, the certificates will be actually mailed home with the report cards and yearbooks if the student purchased one. They'll be taking pictures to post on Facebook and their website, so be ready to smile and wave as you drive by. We sure, him and his staff just miss everybody and hope that you know that we are proud of you. I think I'll be there too, so leave the eggs at home.
Does that conclude your report, Trustee Creaney?
Oh, sorry. That's my report.
Thank you. Richard, do you have a board report this evening?
Yes, I do. But before I give the board report, I'd just like to say thank you to all the teachers. I know last week was Teacher Appreciation Week, and with my limited knowledge of how to send emails, I tried to email them all to tell them that we appreciate, the board appreciates their efforts, and I was unable to do that, so I wanted to put that out tonight just to thank them for all the work they've been doing on these trying times. And also, we don't want to forget the classified staff and the administrators. Just a thank you for everything that everybody's doing. And also the nurses. I know last Wednesday was Nurse Appreciation Day or something like that, Tuesday or Wednesday, so thanks go out to them also. For Carson Middle School, they recently released their schedule for the students to have access to the building to recover their stuff. That starts May 18th and runs through May 27th. the schedule, I've reviewed it, and it's a really good schedule, and it takes into consideration how many students can be in the building at any one time. It takes into consideration the social distancing that needs to take place, and I think they put together a good plan. So I want to thank them for that. Also, at Carson Middle School, recently the sixth grade teachers moved towards what they're calling an A-B day schedule, and this is to help the students navigate their schoolwork. And Friday, they're leaving as a catch-up day, so if they're missing any work, they can catch up. It seems to be working from the feedback that we're getting, and so thank you to the sixth grade teachers. At Boardwalk Bray, they also have a plan for the teachers to clean out their offices or their classrooms, and for the students to get their belongings also. And a date for the parents to pick up the material will be announced. So I just want to thank everybody again. You too, Mr. Stokes, thank everybody else, so thank you. Thank you for helping navigate the district through this trying time. And Laurel, I hear your pain. We have a 11-year-old granddaughter here with us, and I know what you're going through, and I could imagine having 5. I know my daughter-in-law has 4 children all school age, and she's really having a trying time of it also. So thank you for bringing that issue up. And that'll end my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Joe, do you have a board report?
I do. Thanks, Mike. I just wanted to touch on the high school and expand a little bit on what Mr. Stokes was saying. I think I want to extend my thanks to Principal Ward. These are not easy decisions. Everybody, us included, Mr. Stokes, and I think I can speak for everybody, wishes we could have a traditional graduation ceremony for our seniors. Knowing that we can't, I think everybody worked hard to find a way to make this happen and recognize our seniors. I know they're deserving of so much more than we can give them right now. They've missed out on a lot of their senior experience. But we do want to recognize their accomplishments. They've worked hard, and I personally value everything they've done. Not only them, but their parents. It's a difficult decision, and I don't want this change in the norm, as everybody's calling it, to define their entire high school experience. We had 7+ good semesters of traditional school, and unfortunately for our seniors, it ended this way. But they're a great group of students. They're going to go on to do some great things, and we don't want this to define them. Jokingly, I told a couple of them, every day they have to spend time learning about history. Now they are history. People are going to get to read about them. But some of our seniors, many of our seniors who are graduating, have applied to colleges. Some are going to go right into the workforce. But I chatted with several of our seniors, and just so you know, I'm only going to name a few schools, but they've been accepted to UNR, UNLV, Boise State, Arizona State, UW, Pace University in New York, USC, and many, many others. So our students are still working hard, and they've got bright futures ahead of them. I wanted to just mention our teachers, the tremendous job they're doing. I have 2 in my household, and every morning and at lunch when I come back for a bite to eat, they're both engaged with their classes. And whether they're providing student instruction, or they're having meetings, or going through training, or coordinating with their peers, they're actively engaged. And I'm seeing 2 of them do this, but I know many are, and I see the others on the other end of Zoom, how engaged they all are and how they're working together to do what they can to, make this a worthwhile end of the semester for the students of our district. And I really appreciate everything the teachers, the paraprofessionals, the admin staff, and everybody's doing for these kids. I can tell you, watching a teacher, I'll give my wife a plug, teach kindergarten on Zoom, that's a talent. Hats off to all these teachers. Anyway, also real quick, just thanks to the parents. As Laurel said, this is no easy task for the parents either. Not only if you have multiple children do you need multiple computers, but you have parents that are working or trying to find jobs and trying to make ends meet and now helping educate their students. So it really does take a community, and I appreciate everything everybody's doing. So thanks, everybody. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Joe. So just a few things from me. So we had the joint meeting with the executive committee and the representatives from all the school districts for NASB last night. And some of the big things on the agenda that were approved, we extended the executive director, Deb Oliver's contract. We approved a budget. And then one of the things that NASB is advocating for is the governor is putting a task force together to plan for school reopenings. And currently there are no school trustees on that committee. And so they've drafted a letter, or we've drafted a letter, and we'll be sending that in, trying to make sure that trustees are represented on that committee to talk about student and staff safety and school reopenings. Laurel, I think those are the three big things. Did I miss anything?
Just that now we also approved supporting the letter that NAS has organized, that is sending to Senator Rosen regarding federal funding. So NASB is also supporting NAS on that.
Okay. And just for those watching at home, NAS is the Nevada Association of Superintendents. So we're working together with the superintendents on that. Thank you, Laurel. Go ahead, Stacy.
And the other thing was we got the Region 2 NIAA representative, which is Jeff Nevin from Story County, who will take over immediately.
Perfect. Congratulations to Jeff. Thank you. Few other things, obviously, as others spoke about, it was Teacher Appreciation Week, and certainly we are all appreciative of the hard work of our teachers, our staff, our administrators. I think that going back to what Laurel said, not only are the students and the parents struggling with the technology, we have to remember that our teachers also have limited training and limited time to prepare for a transition to digital learning. And so I think there have been some bumps along the way. There have been some successes, but either way, these teachers are putting a lot of thought and effort into meeting the needs of these kids as creatively as possible with real limited time. And so certainly we recognize there are things we want to work on and we are going to improve on, but also we want to recognize that hard work and recognize that. Also with our change in board meetings, we have missed Administrative Assistance Day, and so I wanted to make sure we recognized our board secretary, Renee Cortez, who has a really hard job wrangling all 7 of us and Mr. Stokes and everybody else that needs help. So for those at home, what you probably don't see is there are days she calls us and says, "Don't forget, hon, you have a 6 o'clock meeting today. It's not 7. And I say, "Oh, thank you, Renee. I'll be there." So we certainly appreciate everything Renee does. She is a tremendous help to the board. And so thank you, Renee. And then I've had a lot of conversations with people in the community, teachers, and a lot of frustrations that we didn't have budget discussions on the agenda. Things like graduation was kind of slow to come out in the view of some people. And I just want everybody to recognize it's similar to what Mr. Stokes said. Things are changing sometimes, multiple times in one day. And we are coordinating as best we can. We have our thumbs on as many things as we can, and we're communicating with families and staff and trying to put policies and procedures in place that are best for our students and to support our staff. And sometimes that takes a little bit of patience because until we have information, we're just doing the best we can. And so we appreciate any patience you could give us and understanding that we're doing the best we can do with the limited information we have. These are unprecedented times, and it's trying times for everybody. But I think that one of the things I think is a real highlight is Mr. Ward and his staff at the high school really coming together and supporting our students and families. We know that everybody was really wanting a graduation ceremony. We all, as trustees, were wanting a graduation ceremony. And so I think they found a way to value the students that isn't perfect. It's not what we all wanted, but it is thoughtful and it is going to make the day memorable for those families. And so thank you, Mr. Ward and the Carson High staff. And that will conclude my report. So our next item on the agenda is association reports. Do we have any? Okay. We're not seeing any, so we will move on to public comment. Okay, so I'm just going to read our disclaimer. Comments will be accepted through telephonic participation or through virtual participation via email at publiccomment@carson.k12.nv.us. Comments may be made by members of the public on any matter within the authority of this board. Please note that public comment will be taken on items marked for possible action before the action is taken on such items, and members of the public are encouraged to comment on such items at the time they are being considered. Although members of the board may respond to questions and discuss issues raised during public comment, no action may be taken on such a matter until the matter is placed on the agenda for action at a board meeting. In making public comment, speakers are asked to identify themselves for the record. Speakers are further asked to refrain from speaking over each other if participating by telephone. Speakers are asked to limit their comments to no more than 3 minutes, whether in writing or oral, and not simply repeat comments made by others. And this is for discussion only. And I know we have some, so Raymond?
Aaron, you're unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good evening, Mr. President, school board members, and Superintendent Stokes. For the record, my name is Erin Bean. I am a health teacher at Carson High School. This semester, my health classes brainstormed ways to advocate for health. Our goal was to engage parents in curriculum being taught in the classroom, allowing parents to learn and discuss topics that students were engaging with and learning in school. It was a way to get parents involved. We were able to get one in-person presentation before transitioning to this remote learning. Students, once away from school, asked if we could still do these presentations. I reached out to Partnership Carson City and was able to make the series a reality. We have weekly family engagement presentations via Zoom, which have been very successful and well attended. The presenters include local entities, as well as Carson High School Counselor Bridget Gordon and Carson High School mental health professionals. And their topics include, in some fashion, how to cope with the pandemic we're in. I would personally like to thank School Board Member Lupe Ramirez for agreeing to present to our Latino population on empowering families during social distancing. Her presentation will be next week, May 18th. Also, I want to thank Partnership Carson City for helping make this a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. We appreciate all your hard work. Okay. We have one other. I think Ms. Cortez has one.
Mr. Walker, I have an email, public comment that was sent in, and they want to thank us for taking the question. This person, Shelley Bale, is an language arts teacher at Carson High School, and her question is, has the board discussed what school will look like in the fall if social distancing protocols are still being used? And when will you announce a plan?
Thank you. I think that's one of the things that we are waiting for further guidance from the state, and we're hoping that conditions will improve to a point where we will return to school with normal conditions. That is our primary hope right now, but we anticipate there will be work to be done over this summer with both the budget and the logistics of what school will probably look like next year. So we will be, that's something that we will be working on and communicating as soon as we have any information. So we know that that's an important topic for our families. Anything else? Okay. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the introduction of Core Construction as the construction manager at risk for Eagle Valley Middle School expansion project. This is for discussion only, and we have Mark Johnson, Seth Maurer, and Travis Combs.
Yes. Hi, this is Mark Johnson, Carson School District for the record. I'm going to be introducing them here in a moment. I've got one slide. I'm not going to show you all the slides that are in your packet. That's the one I wanted to bring up. The Eagle Valley expansion project, we will be expanding that over the next 2 years. We're in the concept mode right now. In your packet, you have a few PDFs of the slides. We're going to be going through schematic, which is 30%, then design, 60%, then construction drawings. And we're right at the beginning phase where we're partnering with, and we've selected a CMAR, which is Core Construction, who's going to be partnering with us. Our architect of record is Van Wert Bagodi, and so it's going to be us and our CMAR, which is Core Construction, and Van Wert Bagodi, that are going to help us through this process. And the exciting thing about a CMAR, they're with us in the beginning to help us with the design process. You see before you two concepts, and they're not even conceptual designs yet in your packet. And I'm not going to go through the rough floor plans. The first concept is the one to the south, number 1, where we knock off the back end and we're putting in 10 classrooms and a STEM lab and restrooms. And the other one's off of the west end, where we're putting in a STEM classroom and 10 classrooms and restrooms. We want to do the delivery method with the CMAR, where we have the contractor, which would be Core. They're there at the beginning through the design. We might come up through the schematic, and Core might give an idea and say, hey, let's put it over here 5 stories and come up with a cheaper way and a cheaper method and help with the design. Say, why don't we move it over this way and help us through that? So when we have the contractor right there working with us and partnering with us, they help us with the design right through the beginning. And then when the construction drawings are completed, and then they help us through the bid process and help us through the construction. That's the benefit of a delivery method through a CMAR, construction manager at risk. And Core Construction was selected through the RFP process. We had 6 construction firms look at it, 4 submitted on it, 3 interviewed with us, and the top one was Core Construction. And I'd like to introduce them to us. Before I bring them up, does any of the board member have any questions for me? I don't hear any. I'm just kidding. I was jumping out of it real quick.
Trustees, do you have any questions for Mark? Hearing none. If you'll have an opportunity before we end this, I'll just go down and do a roll call also.
Okay. Seth Maurer is president of Core Construction, and Travis Coombs is vice president, and Travis graduated from Carson High, and I'll turn it over to them, and they can introduce themselves and their company to us.
Thank you, Mark. Hi, everyone. My name is Seth Maurer. I'm the president of Core Construction. We're grateful to be here. We're excited to serve as your construction manager at risk. Just a little history on our company. We were founded over 80 years ago, back in 1937, and since then have really grown to have a strong culture that's founded on team and trust. And so we're in continual pursuit of finding clients that we believe to be in great alignment with. As Mark alluded to before with the construction manager at risk delivery method process, it's really about 100% of what we do. We're very open book and transparent, and every one of those projects has a guaranteed maximum price, which means that's what it costs, no change orders. But in the state of Nevada, really, education's been our passion. It's over 50% of what we do is build for schools, mainly on K through 12 campuses, active campuses. I think we've been on over 100 school campuses in the state, but really had the privilege to serve 12 of the 17 school districts as their construction manager at risk, and very proud to say that each one of them that have had the opportunity to hire us back again have. So again, we're humbled to be here, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to serve on the Eagle Valley Middle School Addition project.
Mark, thank you for that introduction. And again, my name is Travis Coombs. I'm Vice President with CORE. I've been in my professional career for about 20 years now, but I've been in the construction industry for almost 27. My first real job that my dad made me get was pushing a broom and digging ditches for Eugene Lapierre. And then I've also, I worked for John Copolos, doing some drafting in his architecture firm for a short while. So born and raised here in Carson City, attended Carson Middle School, graduated from Carson High School in 1996. And it's just very good to get back to my hometown, the opportunity to continue to serve in my hometown for you guys. I'm in particular, but us as a company, we're very excited for this opportunity to work on the Eagle Valley Middle School Addition project. And as we were coming in, AJ was saying, you appreciate the way that you presented your qualifications in the interview and such. And that's great, but that's not where it ends. It's just where it begins. And our team is 100% committed to serving the school district and the staff and the students at Eagle Valley throughout the course of construction. And if there's ever any indication that we're not serving the way that we should be, Mark's got my cell phone number. I invite each and every one of you to give me a call at any time. But we're excited to serve the students and staff at Eagle Valley and the school district here, but we're also excited to serve the Carson City community. So we always look for creative ways to reach out and engage the communities that we work in, an effort to give back and just participate and be a part of life here. So for me, it's a particular passion that I'm very excited about engaging, and just want to thank you guys for the opportunity.
Well, certainly we want to welcome you aboard. And when I was working at Fritch, worked with your crew quite a bit. So Travis and, oh my gosh, is it John Lynch? Yes, it is. Yeah, John Lynch. And he kept my boss at the time happy, which made me happy. So he was very good with Mary, and he was responsive to our needs. And so it was always a pleasure working with your company, and I'm sure that'll be the same for Eagle Valley. So we're happy to have you on board. Trustees, do you have any questions? I'll just go down. Joe?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I just wanted to say to Seth and Travis, we're happy to have Core Construction as our CMAR. I've had the experience of working with them a little bit, most recently on a current project to our neighboring school district to the north. I just think Core is a top-notch firm, very knowledgeable. Like Travis said, very committed to doing a good job. And if, like any firm with integrity, if something isn't going quite right, or if you have questions, they work hard to make sure they address those needs. And so I think we're in good hands. And again, Seth and Travis, thanks. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Joe. Richard, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. I'd just like to say that we're eager to get this project underway and completed, and looking forward to working with CORE. And thank you guys for being here tonight to introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Richard. Laurel?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's any possibility they'll be able to start a little earlier with the schools being closed right now.
Always with the hard questions, that Laurel.
I can answer that question. We're starting right now. I got a signed agreement in my truck as we speak, and I'll be passing that over to Mark Cornick and Mr. Stokes tomorrow. The part of CMAR is design, and we've got to design it before we build it. If we don't, we'll be in trouble. So this is going to be like a 17-month project. We got to design it, and it'll take about 8 months to design. We'll have it finished up before, not this school year, but for the next school year.
Okay, thanks. I know that was one of the things we were concerned about when the second wave of visitors promotes that there would be enough room. So that was why I was.
And I can't speak for the operational side for the school side, but we've talked to the principal. He's getting ready on his side to make room for the new sixth grade class coming in right now for students.
Thank you. And then just a shout out to Travis because I graduated with your brother Chris. So thanks for helping us out with this.
Thank you, Laurel. Don, do you have any questions?
I had a quick question. When we were first talking about this plan, I know we were throwing around the idea of also, besides the 10 classrooms, maybe some sort of multi-purpose room or cafeteria, expanding that. Is that still in the picture?
That's not part of our design right now. The only thing that's in it is like 10 classrooms, a new STEM classroom, and offices and storage. AJ's going to respond.
I was going to say, so there's still a lot of work with Dr. Conley at Eagle Valley Middle School too, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of his program. So I think there's still some work to do with deciding exactly what'll be there. We know we absolutely need the classroom space and some niceties like the STEM lab, but there's still some more details I think to be worked out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Stacy, do you have any questions? You might be muted if you're asking a question.
I am. I just can't unmute myself.
See, I knew that.
First, I'd like to. I wanted to thank Seth and Core Construction. They've always been a big supporter of NASB and at our conventions, always turning up to help us out. So we do appreciate that. I got a couple of questions, and it might not just be for them. It might be AJ. But what is the budget for this first phase and the second phase?
Currently, gosh, why is it? Because I'm over a speaker.
We're working on technical sound, Stacy.
Okay. There we go. So I think at this point, the expected construction cost is around 7, and then soft costs are 1.2. So altogether, about $8.2 million is what is budgeted in the capital improvement plan. And was there?
And what part of that is contingency for change orders and over stuff? I'm asking because I'm working on a project in Reno, and it's a veterans apartment building, and we're doing the blinds. And because of the COVID thing, they've
You still there, Stacy? I think we're missing most of your comments.
I disrupted. So we're doing a building over in Reno. It's a veterans thing, and we're doing the blinds for it. And so we were supposed to put in the blinds 6 weeks ago, but they closed factories. And now that they're just starting to open up. So the building is 3 months behind. the cost overrides have been huge, and even our cost has gone up $1,500. So since we don't know what's going to be going on in 17 months while we're doing this, I want to make sure that we have a contingency in there to take over these overcosts so that we're not looking at $2 or $3 million over budget.
Right. Well, and I think first, the important thing is with any project, we ultimately don't know what that's going to look like. When we put together the final agreement, we have an owner's contingency. And I can't think of the other contingency name, but we have contingency built into the final pricing that's expected for items that we decide to expand the scope on, or things that were missed on the construction side. So while, yeah, I'll let Cor speak to it a little bit. Travis. Travis Coombs again for the record. That's one of the other benefits of the construction manager at risk process, is that over the next 7-8 months, as we're designing the project, our staff has their finger on that pulse of the market acuity for the construction industry. And so we'll have as clear of an idea as we possibly can about the state of construction cost and things with regard to peripheral influence from outside markets and things like that. So we can communicate and manage those over the course of design. And then as we move into construction, there is some modest level of built-in contingency to account for some of those things. But by the time we get to GMP at the end of the design period, we should have a pretty clear level of understanding of where the market's going and where we can expect to account at the end of the project.
So, and Stacy, I know that we have updates built in typically with these types of projects, and so maybe we could just direct AJ and Mr. Stokes to keep us updated on the scope of these projects and the price tag associated with some of the updates that come.
And Stacy, you remember like 5 years ago, I was estimating our projects for Mark Twain and Fremont. And you remember construction, I talked about the construction cost index. It was rising like at 2% a month and sometimes 3% a month. And by the time we went to construction on Pioneer and construction on Mark Twain, my estimate was completely way off based on our budget. And those went over, and I even jacked up my budget cost for those, and they still went way over because the construction cost index for construction, by the time we went to construction, was so much higher on the bidding projects, if you remember that. But what you're experiencing right now, we couldn't have foreseen that if we had to.
Right.
But we do have contingency in our projects as we move forward. And that's my report.
Thank you. Lupe, do you have any questions?
No questions. I just want to say I appreciate your passion about your involvement in this project. I think it's awesome.
Thank you, Lupe. All right, well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. We look forward to working with you. Next item on the agenda is discussion and possible action on renewal of ground lease agreement for the greenhouse project for a term of 5 years, July 1st, 2020 to June 30, 2025. This is for possible action. Mr. Stokes.
Thank you, President Walker, members of the board. This particular project began several months ago and took a bit of a back seat as we went to our current remote learning process. We have worked closely with the folks from the Greenhouse Project, and in front of you tonight is a new ground lease agreement between Carson City School District and the Greenhouse Project. As indicated in the agenda, one of the changes for this document is an increase in the length of agreement. We have enjoyed a very nice working relationship with the Greenhouse Project. Karen Aboud has been the driving force there. The Greenhouse Project, as you know, serves a number of our students, and we are able to introduce the idea of agriculture and horticulture, agronomics, a variety of career-related applications to our students as a result of the Greenhouse Project. You'll notice that the annual rent that is paid by the Greenhouse Project is about, well, it is $5,000. And when this was first agreed upon, the Greenhouse Project wanted that money to go back into the student activities that were directly associated with the Greenhouse Project, specifically the Future Farmers of America. And that money is used to help buy supplies and materials, and it also helps to defray some of the costs associated with travel and fees associated with state and national contests or events. And so we're really grateful for the relationship that we have with the Greenhouse Project. One exciting change that will be happening with this next cycle is that the Greenhouse Project has raised money and planned for and is getting ready to build an outdoor classroom. It's a 400 square foot building that will be a standalone classroom, and it'll be down there on the same acre lot that is part of the Greenhouse Project. And we've been able, we, meaning the school district, has been part of that fundraising efforts through Valerie Dockery's efforts and also with support from the Greenhouse Project. We were able to apply for and receive a $25,000 grant from the Pennington Foundation. And so that dollar amount will be combined with the monies that have been raised by the Greenhouse Project to build and to get this project of an outdoor classroom off the ground. So we're really excited about that. Mr. Johnson has been part of our discussions, and so the construction, the materials, all of those things that are important to us as a school district have been discussed with the folks from the Greenhouse Project, and all the conditions seem to be in order and ready to go forward. So I present this to you as for your consideration. I'd love to answer any questions that you might have. Otherwise, we're seeking support of this lease so that we might be able to keep our relationship and this really excellent example of a community partnership going with the folks at the Greenhouse Project.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes. Trustees, I'll just do a roll call if you have any questions for Mr. Stokes. We'll start with Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. No questions. I think we've had a great relationship with the Greenhouse. I think they're a vital part of our community and our students. And I'm in favor of this, so I have no comments.
Thank you, Joe. Richard, do you have any questions?
No, I have no questions. I agree with Joe. I think it's an important thing for us to move forward with.
Thank you. Laurel, do you have any questions?
No questions.
All right. Dawn, any questions?
No questions. It's a great program, and they probably have one of the most successful fundraisers in town every year. Their Concert Under the Stars is always in July, so probably not a reality in July this year, but crossing my fingers.
Well, maybe. We'll see what happens, Dawn. Stacy, any questions for Mr. Stokes?
Nope, I think it's a win-win for everybody, and it's a great asset to the school district and the community.
Yeah, I agree with that. Lupe, any questions?
No questions. I'm also in support. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for the kids to have hands-on experience.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
This is Richard, I'll make the motion.
Go ahead.
I move that the Carson City District School Board of Trustees approve the renewal of the ground lease agreement for the greenhouse project for a term of 5 years from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2025.
I'll second that. Lupe, or Trustee Ramirez.
All right, we have a motion by Richard, second by Lupe. Do we have any further discussion by trustees? Just speak up if you have anything further to add. Hearing none, any public comment? All right, just as we've done in the past meetings, I'm gonna call for about a 2-minute recess and allow anybody who is online and wanting to submit a public comment to do so. So we will come back at 8:10. Zoom the meeting. Seeing no public comment, I'll call the question. I'll do a roll call vote for the ease of record keeping. So Joe?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Laurel?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
Stacy?
Aye.
Lupe?
Aye.
And I'm an aye also. So thank you so much, everybody, for your hard work on this project. I think it's a win-win for the city and our students. So thank you for this project. Next item on the agenda is discussion on the newly proposed supervised curriculum PE offering in the Carson City School District. This is for discussion only. Mr. Stokes.
Thank you, President Walker, members of the board. Kind of a distinction to make here in this presentation. Typically, we would bring before you both a change in policy and also a change in regulation. This particular agenda item is neither of those things. It's more of a practice. Let me try to explain why. For a number of years, students attending Carson High School had the ability, if they were engaged in a team sport that was offered by the school, to actually use 2 seasons to amass what would have been the equivalent of 1 year of PE. And as a result, that participation in an on-campus sport allowed them to waive 1 credit of PE. Now, it didn't allow them to earn a credit of PE, but to have the 2 credits that are required for graduation, 1 could be waived. And as time has progressed and as there have been opportunities for activities and athletics not associated particularly with a team sport at one of our high schools, we've had students that have been engaged in club sports, in individual sports, and I'll just name some of these that could be considered: archery, bowling, dance, diving, drum corps, equestrian, golf, etc. Other club sports might be boxing or fencing or gymnastics or ice hockey. So these are events or activities that our students might be engaged in and that are very strenuous, but really there has not been an avenue for them to have the same ability to have the work that they have put into these activities result in a waived PE credit. So this will be a process that will go into effect at the start of the next school year. We do have students who are strenuously involved in some of these activities, and through questions that have been asked by family members, by students, and by parents, we put together this process which works in the same manner as it does for our high school students, and that is, even if a student is engaged in one of these individual or club sports, they still can really only have 1 PE credit waived under this program. So essentially, students who are engaged in PE-type activities off campus have the same opportunities as our students who are working on campus towards a waiver of their PE credit. So I'm excited for this. I'd like to say thanks to my staff. Tasha Fuson has helped in gathering some of this information. We also have several families who have kept the interest of this activity alive and going, and I'm pleased to say that our principals and our counselors in our guidance departments are in favor of the activity as well. And we're grateful that we're going to be able to offer this to a wider group of students in our coming school years.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes. Trustees, I'll just go down the list again and see if you have any questions for Mr. Stokes, starting with Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Stokes. Not a question, but I'm glad we're doing this. I can tell you, with my one daughter growing up as a competitive dancer, you know, these kids in some of these activities put in 30 to 40 hours a week doing what they do. And for them now to be able to count that, you know, towards a credit, I think is the right thing to do. So I'm happy we're doing that. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Joe. Richard?
I have no questions. I'd just like to thank everybody who was involved in this process. I know a lot of people put in a lot of work. I believe Linda Hersel was involved in it, along with Sheila Story and a lot of other people, but I'd like to thank everybody. I think it's a good way to go.
Thank you. Laurel?
I'm just really pleased that this is being offered to the students. I agree with Joe. Some of these club teams are definitely putting in the time that they, I'm glad that they'll be able to waive one of those credits and get the credit for it. So thanks everyone for working on this and the families that supported this as well.
Donald?
No questions. This is an excellent idea. Thank you.
Stacy?
I'd like to thank everybody for their work too. I think it's been a long time coming, and I think it'll make it a lot easier on a lot of our students and parents.
Thank you. Lupe?
I echo everyone's comments. I think this is a marvelous idea. I think this will increase the interest of the students to be active. So a really good thing for them and for their families.
All right. Thank you, everyone. So this is discussion only, so we look forward to hearing how successful this is in the future, Mr. Stokes. Next item on the agenda is the discussion and possible action to authorize the superintendent to negotiate for the purchase of real property located at 1600 Snyder Avenue, Carson City, Nevada, for purchase price not to exceed $4,100,000 as identified in the appraisal. Funding will be provided through authority from the 2010 rollover school bond. This is for possible action, and Mr. Stokes will lead this discussion.
Thank you again, President Walker. Item number 10 is not a new topic to our Board of Trustees. Again, it has taken somewhat of a back seat as we have changed some of our school options and opportunities in the last 2 months. As you know, the school district has shown interest in purchasing a 10.02 acre parcel that is located at 1600 Snyder Avenue. On that property are 5 buildings that are approximately equal in size to a combined total of 43,800 square feet. The property has been established as a school and as a church. It is part of a land patent that was provided by the BLM, and as such, and through its zoning particulars, the site is expected to continue on either as a church or as a school, and if not, there are some other conditions that apply. We have done a 90-day feasibility study on the property. That feasibility time actually ended about the 1st of December, but we had a variety of experts walk through the building, including engineers, contractors, tradesmen, experts in fire systems, IT, air quality, and so forth. And in the end, the property was identified to be in very good to excellent condition. We have walked through the property and seen the different conditions that it has to offer. I want to remind the board that a Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental study has been conducted. It should be noted that beginning in the 1940s, that location was used as an unauthorized dump. And at the site, which was identified as the landfill, so this does not take into account all of the property at 1600 Snyder, but simply where the dump was located. The environmental study showed that there was a source of lead concentration in the amounts of 420 milligrams per kilogram, which is slightly above the EPA preliminary remediation goal of 400 milligrams per kilogram. And that particular study showed that as long, or that lead was available in the dust in the area surrounding, or at least immediately as part of the landfill, and that a remediation condition for that situation would be to put a cap of asphalt on top of it, and that part has been done and exists today. The Phase 1 study and the Phase 2 study was also able to assess the property for soil gas, and groundwater contaminants that might be hazardous to humans if the property were to be considered for reuse or potential redevelopment. And the authors of the study did not recommend a need to do further subsurface testing of the property and really found those conditions to not be an issue. You'll remember that at the beginning of last school year, we had a 10-member citizen committee that assembled and met a variety of times. We also introduced the concept of purchasing this property to a number of citizens who attended our community PLC meetings. In each case, the citizens who heard and listened to our presentations found favorable reasons that would be to purchase and to consider purchasing the property. At the present time, the citizens group had agreed that a likely use for the property would be as an elementary school. However, there has not been a final determination made by the board as to what that property would be used as. You'll recall that the sellers initially put forward an asking price of $5.67 million. After an appraisal was done on the property, that appraisal came back to show the value of the property at $4.1 million. And as such, I was hoping that we might come back together, put this topic in front of the board, have further discussion, and to see whether or not the trustees felt comfortable in authorizing the district to move forward with the advice of our legal counsel to meet with the sellers and also the realtors and see if we could come up with a potential sale price not to exceed $4.1 million in the purchase of this property.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes. Trustees, if you have any questions, I'll just go down the list again. Maybe I'll mix it up so you never know when you're going to be called on. Don, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I do, I guess, questions, comments. Now, the 4.1 million, my understanding, that's bond money, correct? That's capital improvement money?
I'm sorry, Trustee Creaney, would you please state your question? I had overlooked some slides that I had available, and I didn't actually run through those. I got so excited to talk about 1600 Snyder Avenue. So my apologies.
Oh, no problem. The 4.1 million, my understanding, is bond money, right? Capital improvement money from another bond.
Yes, thank you. So back in 2010, the voters of Carson City approved a 10-year rollover bond, which meant that for the decade 2010 to 2020, the school district, as long as we did not increase our debt limit, that we could sell a school bond which could fund capital projects. Then in the 2017 legislative session, a law was passed that allowed any rollover bond that existed in the state of Nevada to actually exist for another 10 years. So we actually have access to this rollover school bond through the year 2030. So we do have a great opportunity here, I think, to tap into capital project dollars that will help us in a variety of ways.
I'm for this project. I think in the future, Carson City is going to need this property. I guess, however, do we, and I know it's just a guess now, do we have numbers, once, let's say we buy it, we're still going to have to take care of it, whether we use it right away or not, probably going to have to take care of it, and maybe we want to use the concert facility or the meeting facility as well. Do we have numbers as far as general fund money to care for it that is going to come out of the budget?
Mr. Carini, I'm going to look at AJ. I know we are getting ready to talk about our capital improvements projects and plan. That will be part of our budget discussion. And I know that there has been some discussion regarding 1600 Snyder Avenue, and so I'll let Mr. Fueling respond.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes. So clearly the operating costs of the facility are going to be dependent upon the level of usage, which we don't exactly know to start, but from just a standpoint, I don't have exact numbers, but just to frame, in across the district in a given year, we spend about 1.1 million on utilities. And that's across active campuses and active buildings. At least initially, this is a building that likely it's not going to get daily use. So it's something that I think from at least that standpoint, the costs would be, there certainly will be some costs, but they'll be minimal given the actual timing of occupancy. As far as staffing, when the building is used, we'll have to get someone over there to, for setup before and pick up after. So there will be some costs associated with that. But again, just based on the fact that at least in the beginning, I think it'll be relatively little use. The operating cost should be relatively low.
Yeah, I guess that's my concern. I'm for the project, but with the state and fiscal emergency and the budget uncertainty, that's where I really want to discuss this tonight. I'm anxious to hear the rest of the trustees here. My last comment, I guess, maybe with the concert facility, possibly there might be some revenue gain if we were able to rent that out to maybe private groups. Anyway, that's the end of my comment.
Thank you, Don. Lupe, do you have any questions for Mr. Stokes or AJ?
I don't have any questions. Actually, the question I was going to ask has already been asked, so that was my concern too. I'm just concerned about the maintenance cost and if we're going to be able to afford that. And another thought is we're going to have a hard time justifying this expense being with the current circumstances that are happening and everyone being concerned about the budgets. How are we going to be able to, I feel like we're going to have to do a lot of explanation to individuals. So maybe just to be, maybe we just need some clear guidance or direction on how to respond to these questions.
I think AJ wanted to respond, and possibly Mr. Stokes. Lupe.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Ramirez. I think one really important thing to remember, and this can be a confusing topic for those who aren't living kind of in this world of school finance, or government finance. But we have very specific funds, 20 different funds across the district's books, and each fund, for the most part, have very specific purposes. And the funds we're looking at here to make this purchase and maybe do some improvements are coming from the bond that Mr. Stokes discussed, and those funds are clearly deposited into this to a bond fund. There's no other use for those funds besides capital project type items. We also have a capital projects fund, which is different than the bond fund, but the intent and use of those funds are the same. We can't fund regular school district operations from those funds. Their intent is entirely for capital improvements, capital purchases, and equipment across the district.
Thank you, AJ. That helps a lot.
So if I might add a little more detail to that, the property itself does have some need for modifications and updates. I think Trustee Carini mentioned that what was the newest building out there that could be used as a performance hall or as an auditorium. I think that's turnkey. That's a building that could be used for a variety of uses. But any change to the building, any addition, for example, it was suggested that maybe some storage rooms or maybe dressing rooms be added on to that particular building. Again, the money that would be used for that particular purpose is money that Mr. Fueling was referring to as the capital projects funding. And so that money is available to us, and we have the ability to make those modifications as needed. Now, even without making a determination as to what that building would serve as immediately, we would actually have some time, I think, to get ready for that, and even another opportunity to pass an additional school bond, should we need it, to modify that building even more at a future time. We wouldn't necessarily have to fill it immediately as a school, and in fact, given the square footage that's out there, we could even consider opening that building as a rental property to another school if that possibility presented itself. So there are a variety of opportunities associated with this. Even if the school district doesn't use it immediately, we believe it still could serve as a way to have a little money come into the school district as a revenue source.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes. Stacy, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have the same concerns as Dawn and Lupe at this point. A lot of the cities and the other school districts are canceling their capital projects that they haven't started yet, and with everything going on, I'm a little nervous. Plus, we have staff cuts, and the perception of that, along with taking on a $4 million building, is a little unnerving. And I know a lot of people out there forget that we have capital funds that can only be used, and I'm thankful that AJ brought that up in his discussion. But it is a kind of an uncertain time right now, so those are my concerns.
Thank you, Stacy. Laurel.
So I think it's still a good purchase. I think the appraisal price came in lower than what we planned, and we did budget in our capital plans for this purchase price. Correct, AJ?
That's correct.
Okay, and so I think the most difficulty that we will face is just helping the public to understand that this money that's budgeted for capital projects can only be used for capital projects. We could not save positions or do other things when we're going to be facing budget cuts. We couldn't use this money for something else. And so I think that's just going to be really important that we help our community to understand that. But I do think it's a good idea to look forward to the future, even though it is uncertain times right now. I think long term, this is a good move for the district.
Thank you, Laurel. Richard?
Yes, I have some of the same concerns that have already been stated. The one big concern I had was the perception of the public about us spending this kind of money right now when we're facing the fiscal difficulties and possible major budgetary reductions that sounds like it's on the horizon. And, you know, I understand it's a different pot of money, but there again, it was pointed out that the operating cost and the maintenance cost of keeping that building in order is going to come out of general funds. And I'm just concerned with the budget cuts that we're going to have to take, where that money is going to come from. And then I'm also concerned that if we do try to use it as a school and just don't keep it mothballed, for lack of a better term, where is the money going to come from to staff it? You need principals, you need janitors, you need bus drivers. And I know some of that stuff can be moved around, but there's still going to be additional operating costs. And in reality, I'm thinking, we don't know how long this budget reductions are going to continue. I mean, it could be years maybe before the state gets caught up in their balanced budget, so to speak. So I just wanted to make that comment, but I do have another question, or a couple questions. Would the $4.1 million purchase price include the commission for the real estate realtor?
Rich, they're looking into that right now.
With some added information from Mr. Pavlakis, he suggests that that's a topic that could be negotiated.
Yeah, because last time, you know, even though they had a set purchase price, they came back and wanted another, $165,000 tacked on. I believe that was a cost that may have been a little bit more or less for the realtor fee. So I'd like to know that answer, I guess. And then also the $3.65 million for the capital project improvements for the buildings. I know that you listed out what that's going to include, but didn't it need a kitchen addition and some other work to be done, additional classrooms and everything before it could really be occupied as a school?
Mr. Varner, I believe what I had put forth initially was aimed at really bare entry-level kinds of changes. If we were to go in and redo the school in a greater in a greater effort, then yes, you're right. It would take more to bring that school up to a point where we would want to use it so that it was equitable to other schools in our district.
If we're going to bring it up to be equal to the other schools, and if we don't have the bond money, or do you anticipate having bond money to do that? Or would that have to come out of a general fund at a later time?
Trustee Varner, this is AJ. So the district, based on our current debt service schedule, would have the ability to bond again in 2025 and again in 2029. So there's a couple opportunities in the near future timeframe to potentially get some more funds to do some of the work on that school. And the currently in 2025, I believe Marty Johnson, the number he has that would be available to us is about $25 million. And I think in 2029, it was an additional 20 at this time.
So would the proposal, Mr. Stokes, would the proposal be to purchase a property, do the improvements you had listed on the slide here, and then just kind of keep it in the state of repair without it really being occupied until the additional improvements in 2025 or 2029 could be made?
The goal would be, yes, to secure the property for the school district, And we would have as part of our capital projects list or plan, the monies put aside to put towards that campus in a variety of different ways, and that could be determined by the board. One of the reasons that I brought this up at this point is I did receive a call from a citizen who had interest in the property. I didn't want us to lose out to someone else who may be a competing interest. So I understand the board's concerns at maybe purchasing property at this time. I think Trustee Crossman said it nicely when you think about the long-term capacity of the school district, and if you think about just before times got bad, we were wringing our hands wondering whether or not we might have enough space to actually house all of our students. And so having something like this property as an asset to the district was something that we were interested in at the time. I know times have changed a little bit, but again, knowing that there is a difference in our operational budgets and our capital budgets, I felt like this was something that we probably needed to at least review and reconsider and think about prior to maybe losing to another competing interest.
Thank you. One other question, and I'll get on my soapbox here. The $7.75 million to purchase and improve the property, if the board would elect not to move forward with it, could that money be used to add any classrooms to the high school? Because I know that before long the high schools are going to be really overcrowded. I know it's already overcrowded.
Thank you, Trustee Varner, and that's certainly another philosophical question that needs to be addressed by our board, by our school district, and that is, do we want to continue to expand Carson High School? Do we want to look at another venue for considering educational opportunities for our secondary students? So, but you're right in that using any monies that is budgeted for capital projects, that would be an allowable cost under the conditions that you stated. We can use capital projects to increase or to modify or build onto or remodel any of our schools.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak so much. I appreciate it.
Well, the citizens of Carson City gave you the opportunity to speak so much, Mr. Varner. Thank you for your questions. Joe, do you have questions for Mr. Stokes or AJ or Mike?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I do. I have the same concerns that several of the trustees brought up. I think considering the purchase of this site has some merit. I was happy to see that we went through the phase 1 and phase 2. And while, some things did come up a little hot, they weren't so much so that they're really going to be a concern. So from an environmental standpoint, that's something we can certainly work with and not do anything to jeopardize the health or safety of the students or staff there. But when we're already looking at a $2.3 million deficit that we were struggling with, and we identified, a significant cut to consider with paraprofessionals, and now the governor's saying, make some plans for up to another 14%. The future is really so unknown right now. We know we know we can't occupy brick and mortars this remainder of the school year. It's questionable whether or not we can start next school year. There's just so many unknowns that I do think it's going to be a public perception nightmare to justify making such a purchase right now when we're looking at possibly some significant cuts across the district. And, when we talk about like high schools and overcrowding. I mean, we probably will have to look at, when that need arises, doing some additions to our high school, because it's probably not in most of our career lifetimes that we're going to see a new high school in town, given how much it costs to build such a facility. And with our other districts, you know, we've had some deferred maintenance going around or deferred maintenance that we've been dealing with that at some point we're going to have to address. I'm struggling with this right now, and I just personally, rather than be put in a position I have to consider not voting for this, I'd kind of like a little more time to digest what we think the plan's going to be with this, and maybe give folks a chance to comment on this. I could see a lot of our school district employees wondering why we put this on the agenda now for an action item, and people are going to say, you know, whether perceived or otherwise, that they didn't get a chance to, you know, react or comment on this before a vote was made. So I'm leery in those regards. So I'm kind of on the fence right now. I can see the merit in it, but I'm struggling with thinking this is the right time. That's all I have for now, Mike.
Thank you, Joe. And, you know, just personally speaking, I've obviously been skeptical of the project since the inception. Speaking with Mr. Stokes, you know, I think that he wants some guidance from us as the trustees so that he could either continue to invest his time and efforts on this project, or know that this is something to put on the back burner until a different time. And I think that we owe him that. We've had this discussion several times. So when he proposed putting it on the agenda, I was in agreement, because he just needs to figure out if this is something that we're investing in, or invested in at this point. I think that probably the public perception is going to be a nightmare, like everyone has said. I think that if we're really looking at, we're not going to occupy the building for a while, that even adds more fuel to the fire of, then why was it necessary? I just think there's a lot of unknowns, and I certainly respect the judgment of our leadership in the district, but I also have some misgivings about this, but I will support the will of the board with this. But I think that, Joe, I know that we've kind of been getting public comment on this for a while now, and I think that we owe our staff the courtesy of making a decision and giving them some guidance of which way to go. I think that that's the right way to go for not only our staff, but also the seller and the realtor.
So Mike, my question, this is Laurel, is if we authorize Mr. Stokes to negotiate for the purchase of the real property, would he then still kind of need to come back to us to approve of the purchase? So is this just a step to negotiate? Because this is a significantly, I know that it's the 4.1 is the appraisal, but the original asking price was 5.7, I believe. So I guess that, and maybe that's a question for Mr. Pavlakis or Mr. Russell there? I can't.
Mr. Pavlakis is here rocking the beard. You wouldn't even recognize him. But I think that
I'm a little sad we don't have video, but I guess that's my question is this, if we were to go forward with this at this point, would it just be to negotiate the contract, and then we would still need to come back to final approval contract?
that is true.
And I feel like I mean, maybe AJ knows, have capital fund bond monies ever been allowed to be transferred over to pay for salaries or to pay for other operational expenses? If there's if it's prohibited from using that money to obviously, you know, where we need it, what good do we do with it if we don't do, you know what I mean? I see that need of, hey, we budgeted this in capital funds. If we can't use the money to help pay salaries, long term, I think this is a good, and I understand that everything's uncertain, but I think I'm going to be hopeful. Everything's going to come back eventually. We don't know when yet, and things are uncertain. But I think in a year or two, we're going to see a need for this. And then I guess if we do come back and some of the talking of having, maybe we need more square footage sooner than we think if we start looking at having to have kids spaced out in classes. I don't know. But even if the cost operationally would be minimal, but we could use that other facility immediately as soon as we could have concerts again. I don't know. So I think maybe AJ, I think I left a question in there somewhere for AJ.
I think she asked if the capital funds have ever been converted or.
Right. Thank you, Trustee Crossman. So bond funds must be used for only capital project-related items, and specifically because of the tax consequences when those funds are, when we go out to the markets to get those funds, they have to be used on the types of projects that we are expected, or we have said that we are going to be using them on. So it's only those costs related to capital projects. There's no other choice.
But I think that the question also is that we use the capital funds to purchase the property, but then we also have an impact to our budget to maintain the property and to convert it into a facility that could house students. You know what I mean? I think a conference hall at this point with what we're facing is pretty low on the priority list, whereas if we're looking at classroom space, then we're going to have even more work to do to kind of fashion it to be an elementary school, or certainly a middle school or high school would be a lot more work.
I agree, but again, converting it to, making it into an elementary school would again be capital funds. And it wouldn't be from the same funding stream. So,
I know what you're saying, Laurel. It's just, I think that there's also the real cost once it's purchased, and we're looking at, I think none of us could even really truly wrap our head around what a 6, 10, or 14% budget reduction is going to look like within our district. It's pretty daunting to think about, and I just don't know what that would even look like. And I don't think that even if I asked Mr. Stokes how our district would look with those conditions, I know we don't have an answer, because I don't think anybody in this state has an answer of what they would do in that situation. And I think that's the perception that is going to be hard to explain to people. And if people's jobs are impacted or whatever might happen, I think that we just have to be really conscious of that. So I guess, do we have any public comment on this item?
Please be somebody.
This is Don. I want to maybe make one last comment.
Sure, Don.
I guess, obviously, I'm on the fence. I agree with Laurel. I don't want to panic in hard times and not do the right thing for the future of the district and the city. I have a very good friend that's a PhD economist, and he made a good point to me about the economic crisis that we're in right now. 2008, the Great Recession, was truly an economic crisis. This recession or economic crisis, whatever we want to call it, that we're in, is something of our own choosing, because we shut the economy down ourselves. We got to think of it that way. I'm optimistic that when this crisis is over, the better times are ahead. as soon as people feel safe again, and that's the big question here, obviously, vaccine, whatever, as soon as people are safe again, the economy should come back. And that's the issue. Is that going to happen in a year, 2 years? Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out. And I'm open to tabling this as well.
Seeing no public comment, I'll entertain a motion from the floor.
This is Laurel, if the trustees would be more comfortable tabling this, I feel like we've put in a lot of work, and I don't want to, vote no and end everything all the work that's been put into this right now when we're all in a bit of a crisis mode. So if the trustees would feel more comfortable with tabling this to our next board meeting in order to have the public have an opportunity to comment more, make sure, I don't know, maybe we'll know more by then. I'd be open to that.
So personally speaking, my preference would be to give some guidance, and our next meeting is going to be focused largely on the budget. And so I think we have to decide which way we're going and give Mr. Stokes that guidance. I think that it's time for us I personally think it's time for us to make a decision. Mr. Stokes?
I mentioned earlier that one of the reasons that I asked Mr. Walker if we could address this tonight was based on that phone call that I got. Now, prior to having that phone call from another party that I don't even know how interested they are, there had been no other interest in the 1600 Snyder Avenue property. So, the other thought here, obviously we have done a lot of work which is going to remain valid unless the property falls derelict and we wait too long and there's no upkeep or maintenance done to the property. But, to say we want to wait and see what the economy does or wait until times get better, it's like any real estate deal. Somebody else could beat you to it or it might stay vacant. So, it does really determine or come down to how the board feels and whether or not you feel this is the right time to move forward. And believe me, I'm here to serve you. I'm not here to try to put forward my own agenda. Personally, I do believe it is the kind of a property that could benefit the district in the long run and in the short run, simply because if you recall back when we had not this master planning session, but the one before, one of the prime considerations at that time was a performance hall of some kind. When this surfaced, it seemed like this might answer that question, plus serve as extra square footage for the school district, which at the time seemed to be something that was really on the horizon. So I'm certainly here to serve at your pleasure and will follow your guidance.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes.
And just a quick question for AJ. With the addition at Fremont and Mark Twain that we just did, can you refresh my memory as to how many classrooms were added and what the cost of those additions were?
I think for Mark Twain, I believe we added 8 classrooms, and at Fremont it was, I believe, 5, but there were 3 special ed, maybe it was 6, and then there were 3 special education classrooms added. And both of those projects came out to about $5 million individually.
because my point on that would just be that I see the value in the square footage, not just the performance hall, but the full gymnasium, of course, the classroom buildings need updating. But 8 classrooms for 4 million or for 5 million or all of this for 4.1 is a good value for the district.
This is Stacy. Just to piggyback up on the performing arts thing, the other thing we have to keep in the mix is the city has a huge cut too. And even before the city was talking about cuts, there was talk about how much use that we put onto the community center, especially the performing arts theater, and they don't get anything for it. And so that is one of the discussions that started before this pandemic, and I don't know if it'll continue, but that has to be something to keep in the mix. If we turned it into a performing arts place, then we wouldn't have to worry about fees being added.
Yeah, this is Joe. That's a good point, Stacy, but also, if we have another facility to do this, that means we have to maintain it and upkeep, provide the upkeep. And even if we get this for say $4 million to convert it into an elementary school, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's going to be, if we only spent another $5 million, I'd be surprised. So I think there's still a pretty significant cost to get it, to a place where it really works for us. Again, I like the idea and the opportunity, but I think timing is everything, and I'm struggling with the timing right now.
And I agree with you, Joe. Those are my same concerns too.
So I guess I'll open the floor for a motion of some kind from the trustees.
Well, just so we can move on with the meeting, I would propose that we put this off for 2 more weeks, even though some of our questions still aren't going to be answered then, but maybe at that point we'll all become comfortable. I know it's been a stress on the seller and the staff to put it off for 2 more weeks, but maybe now that we're discussing it, the public may have something to say. But just to put the motion on the table so we can get on with this is I motion that we put this off for 2 weeks.
I'll second that. This is Laurel.
All right, any discussion from the trustees?
This is Joe. I like the idea of tabling it. I'd like to, for me, I'd really like to get through our budget discussions before we revisit this. And I know that we run the risk of somebody coming in and making an offer, but we've got some pretty big numbers to deal with. And I see Mike's point. I agree with Mike that we really owe it to Richard and everybody that's put in a lot of work on this to give them some guidance. But I'm concerned if we were to call for a vote today, I wouldn't be able to give them a yay. And I'd really like to get a better sense of, where we're going with our budget before we entertain this. But if it's the board's will to bring it back in 2 weeks, I'd be okay with that, I guess.
Joe, and I think if we're looking at 2 weeks, and Stacy, you might consider this as the person who made the motion, I'm not sure in 2 weeks we're going to have any more information than we have right now. So we do have a public comment.
Mr. Walker, we have a public comment. This is from Christina Bourne, and her question is regarding the property at 1600 Snyder Avenue. Would this property be something we could use immediately in the event that we need more physical space due to the social distancing requirements that may be enforced?
And my understanding is we would need to do some renovations. I think there's portions that could be used if we needed to, but we would not, it's not suitable to be a school site as it is in the current conditions, correct?
I believe there are portions of the campus that could be used immediately. The sanctuary, the newest building there could be, I think it's turnkey. I know that we had talked about making some modifications that would improve its use to the district, but I think as it sits, it could be used.
All right, any other discussion from the trustees? All right, so we have a motion to table this, by Stacy, seconded by, was it Laurel? By Laurel. Any final public comment?
So to be clear, this is Joe. Are we tabling for 2 weeks or longer?
I've suggested that Stacy amend her or propose an amendment to her motion because in 2 weeks, I think we're going to be in exactly the same spot. We're not going to have more information.
I would agree.
Okay, I'll amend the motion as long as staff's okay with it, because part of the problem seems to be that we have a seller that's involved, the owner, time is probably of the essence for them too. So as long as staff is okay with that, then I will amend my motion.
Yeah. Mr. Stokes is in agreement with that. Laurel, do you approve the amendment?
Yes.
So the motion is to table this item until a future agenda as determined by the board president and superintendent. Okay. Any final comments, trustees? I'm going to call the question. Joe?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Laurel?
Aye. And just a question, were you going to do the 2-minute recess for public comment on this one, or have we talked long enough that we don't need to do the recess?
Well, staff has been constantly monitoring and we've had a lengthy conversation, so no, I was not.
Okay, just checking.
Okay. Dawn?
Aye.
Stacy?
Aye.
Lupe?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye also. So motion passes to table this item. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. This is for possible action.
This is Stacy. I motion that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it. This is Joe.
Okay, we have a motion by Stacy, second by Joe. Any discussion from the trustees? Any public comment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Joe?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Laurel?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
Stacy?
Aye.
Lupe?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is informational items. Do we have any questions for Mr. Stokes or staff about any of the informational items? Hearing none. We'll move on to requests for future agenda topics.
This is Stacy. This is something that we were talking about at the beginning with all of everybody's board reports. I'd kind of like to see on that recovery committee, the parent teacher on there, because I live next door to 2 teachers and they have 4 kids, and how they're doing this distance learning has got to just be amazing. So if we could have at least a parent that is a teacher on that committee. And then the other thing is, now that we have the budget coming up on the next meeting, if we could get out most of the information out to the public like a week before our meeting so that they know what we're looking at cutting or what the deficit's going to be, stuff like that. Try every way that we can get that out so that we're not, so they feel that they understand what we're doing.
I think that we'd all agree with that. I think that one of the challenges we might run into is that some of the information is changing, and so I think that at that time when we send out the information, we'll want to make sure we want to send out the latest, but I think we also have to notice the meeting in appropriate time with the open meeting law. So I think communication is key, but I think one of the things Stacy, Mr. Stokes, and I also talked about is probably we're envisioning this budget discussion to be based on the assumptions that we've been making this school year based on what AJ and his team have kind of forecast with the knowns we had before March. And it's very likely that the realities of after March 16th are going to kind of come hitting us in the summer sometimes, and we'll be coming together as trustees and looking at revising the budget is probably the safest thing just to be aware of.
And I realize that. I just want the public to realize that. I think that's part of the thing that I'm struggling with the last agenda item is I just don't think that the public understood it either. So the more we all know that it's going to change probably 20 times before it actually goes into effect. So I just want to make sure that we look like we're being very transparent and we know that it's going to be changing and that they have the most up-to-date information like we do.
Yeah, I think that that's fair. So do we have any requests for future agenda topics? I know, Laurel, we were talking about a couple ideas you had. Do you have an agenda item that you have in mind, or?
You know, I have a lot of ideas and I don't remember which one I'm going to talk to you about.
Well, you talk to me about a lot, so I'm putting it on you, Laurel.
I know, that's why I'm like, oh, what did I talk about? I think I'll bring it up when I formulate it better as an idea, not just.
Hey, Mike, this is Joe.
Yes, Joe.
Not necessarily an agenda item, but Richard, as we get a little closer to, fine-tuning the details associated with the modified graduation ceremony for the high schools, if there's I'm not sure the role the trustees will be able to play, and it'll be a personal decision, but I'd like to be involved in the ceremony in some aspect, whether it's, I'm happy to help out handing things out or, whatever we decide is the appropriate way to go. But I'd like to get a little more, once we get more detail figured out, I'd like to know what it is and offer my help.
Joe, this is Richard. Mr. Ward has sent out some information via email.
Rich, I think Mr. Stokes was going to respond to Joe, and then I'll let you continue with your comments.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Thank you, trustees. One of the things that I do know is that Mr. Ward believes that he can get through the entire graduating class in about 8 hours. Now, that doesn't mean that it'll be a full 8-hour ceremony. His idea is that he would break the class down into groups of 4, and then there would be about some period of time, an hour and a half possibly, with some break before the next group starts. So he would be asking for volunteers from the trustees who might be willing to come for one of those 2-hour sessions. So I was just thinking of Mrs. Crossman. She would certainly want to participate with her son when it's his turn to walk across the stage, so that she might be present for that. And so likewise, if any of the trustees had members of this class that they wanted to particularly engage with, they might be able to sign up for the 2-hour period of time that puts them in the same session as that special senior. And so again, I think you can participate as much as you would like or as little as you like, because we also realize that some folks might still have underlying health conditions that might prevent them from engaging in this activity.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Joe again. I appreciate that. I know, Principal Ward sent out an email and I read it. You know, I just know as it gets closer, we'll be fine tuning it. So, no, I think that's perfect. You answered my questions.
And this is Laurel. Just so you know, I'm hugging my son, so don't social distance shame me when you see it, because we live together, so.
I will cheer you on, Laurel.
Thanks.
All right, any final thoughts or agenda items? Hearing none, I will adjourn the meeting at 9:15.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good job. Miss you guys.
Thank you.